Now, Erickson said that identity development is a key part of adolescence, and that would be across the globe, universal. However, he also believed that the way that we go through this stage is going to be quite different depending on where you live in the world. One of the ways that it could be different is along the lines of, is this a full-blown crisis? Like, am I really unsure of who I am and this is bringing me a lot of discomfort? Or is it more manageable? Maybe still a challenge, but more manageable. One of the key things that he said was a player in this question of, is it a full-blown crisis or is it manageable, comes down to the number of options or decisions that we have to make. If we have more options and more decisions, this makes the identity search more difficult. You can imagine in the United States and other parts of the Western world, for example, we have many more options typically, or on average. So just look at the number of majors that we offer at Augustana. And not just the number of majors, but the number of careers that are associated with each major. This can make this challenge or the search more difficult. If you live in a place where, let's say your parents led a certain life and had certain careers, and your grandparents had the same type of careers, usually it's a situation where, hey, that's going to be my life too. And potentially that makes identity development, at least as it relates to career, a little bit more manageable. But back to the Western world, because we have so many options and decisions to make, not just to careers, but to our love lives and romantic partners, our living options, all sorts of different types of questions. Erickson believed that we needed a timeout in adolescence to kind of figure out who we are. And he called this the psychosocial moratorium. So what this means is that it's timeout, as I said, but it's a timeout from responsibility, or real responsibility and obligation. So you could think about this as, for many of us, high school and into college as well. He said that if you don't have this time, this time of psychosocial moratorium, then what's happening is that you're restricting your self-discovery. If you don't have this time to figure out who you are, then how can you really discover your true self? So in the Western world, we remain in schools. This gives us an opportunity to think about the future. Yes, of course, there are lots of individual differences in people. So some people become teen parents, for example, or some teens are, having to work to support their families. In both of those situations, perhaps they don't have this moratorium. But for others, this is a time where you can experiment with different roles and identities, try to figure out who you are. Again, this is all a process about self-discovery. Erickson said that without this time period, again, full exploration cannot occur, and he believed that it was healthiest to grow into your adult identity rather than being forced. So taking time to figure out who you are to grow into that person that eventually you're going to be. But not everybody goes through this process and stage of identity development in a healthy way, or they don't come out of it in the most ideal, optimal way. It doesn't mean that eventually they can't get there, but the process didn't go the way that it was designed. And so there are three types of problems, according to Erickson, that may arise when individuals are approaching and trying to resolve these crises. The first problem is called identity diffusion, and this applies to people who never really have a complete sense of self. Their sense of themselves is incoherent, so there's pieces that are just not brought together into a whole. This could range from being more mild to more severe, and it affects us in a broad array of ways. So first, it could lead to disruptions in individuals' sense of time. I first want to bring this back to, make you think that this is a theory. So not to say that this was empirically tested, but a theory. But back to the subpoints here. Disruptions in an individual's sense of time, this idea that perhaps maybe people's lives are going much faster than mine. I feel like I'm left behind. Or it could go in the other direction where it feels like my life is going really quickly, and that's because like, things are just happening to me. Individuals who are having identity diffusion as a problem tend to have excessive self-consciousness, meaning that it's difficult to make decisions. They're exceedingly concerned with what other people are thinking and needing other people to help them make decisions. And as you can imagine, this could lead to problems in work and school. If you don't know who you are and you don't have a clear sense of that, it can affect all of your different areas of your life, all aspects of your life. If you don't know like what your goals are, what your values are, and who you are, going through life isn't just about checking boxes, but why am I doing this? What's the purpose? Individuals often have difficulty in forming intimate relationships along those same lines. And Erickson posed that some may also have concerns over sexuality. So what I mean about this last point here is that, again, if you don't know who I am, who you are, and aren't sure of who you are, then it could be like, well, who am I attracted to? Who is my potential romantic partner? I just want to make this very clear. I'm not saying that individuals who identify as LGBTQ plus are in the stage of identity diffusion. It doesn't go in the opposite direction. What I'm saying is that some people who are in this identity diffusion problem area are questioning who they are. It doesn't go in the other direction. I want to make sure that's super clear. Another problem that can emerge in identity development is called identity foreclosure. And this is the idea that some people decide who they are prematurely. And this, what I mean by prematurely is it's before they've actually gone through this process of self-discovery or experimentation. This premature choice could be something that they're choosing, or like, so it's willing or unwillingly. So here are two examples. One, it could be the case that from a really young age, you decide to go into medicine. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. Let's say this is happening in childhood. How is that shaping you? That's shaping you in terms of what classes you're doing, what kinds of after school activities you're doing potentially, what you're doing over the summer potentially. Again, let's say you're going to camps that are science camps. It shapes who you're hanging out with. And Erickson said that what's happening is that you're not considering alternatives. So you're prematurely committing yourselves to that role. Another example, I'm going to use my own husband as an example here. When my husband was growing up, his grandpa had been a mechanic, his dad had been a mechanic. And so when my husband was even a little boy, he was like, I'm going to become a mechanic. When he was in high school, he chose to take classes that would lead him down that path. So he took all those shop classes and related coursework that would lead him to that path. What he didn't do was explore. So he didn't take other classes that would shape him in different ways. It was not the liberal arts perspective. So for example, he took the bare minimum in terms of science classes, the bare minimum in terms of history classes, the bare minimum in terms of all the classes. And not to say he didn't do well in all of those. But what happened for my husband, which I think is a prime example of identity foreclosure or why it could be problematic, is that after he graduated from high school, went on to get an associate's degree in automotive technology, and quickly learned for him that this was not the path for him. In fact, after working at a job for a short period of time, less than a year, he decided he hated it. And it came to the point of, now what am I going to do? I've never explored. I've never experimented. I don't know what else I'm good at. And I don't know where I should go next. Um, Ultimately, he's found a different path and is a small business owner now. But at the time, this was very hard to go through. Like, what am I going to do next? So Erickson said that, again, this is if you're somebody who is making a premature sense of identity, this is or choosing who you are too early, this can really disrupt your full range of potential or discovering that full range of potential. Not to say you can't get through this problem, but it's a problem at least at the moment. And some people may continue to struggle with it for, the majority of their lives. I want to make a note that if you decided to, let's say, become a doctor when you were 6 years old, and you still want to be a doctor today, this doesn't necessarily mean you're going through identity foreclosure, because it could be the case that you also questioned it. You've thought about, well, what are other career paths? What else am I good at? And if you ultimately decided that being a doctor was right for you, then that doesn't mean that this is problematic, because that experimentation and exploration still occurred. This is the last slide I have related to identity, and it's the third problem, according to Erickson, that could emerge in identity development. And this third problem is called a negative identity, and it's the idea that sometimes people choose an identity that is undesirable to the people who matter to them, or to the community or society at large. And I'll tell you why. But here's an example first. Let's say you have parents who are really successful, and they're really pushing you to be successful as well. But instead, an adolescent gets in trouble with the law or doesn't go to college and therefore doesn't meet certain academic goals or certain measures of success. What Erickson posed is that this negative identity emerges because that there's been problems with identity development broadly. So remember I said that identity is really stemming from our interactions with others, and particularly those who matter to us. So the way that this problem develops is that you've tried and failed to receive positive recognition from the people who matter to you. These are often parents, but not solely. And you just didn't get that positive recognition. And so what happens is that some individuals decide to turn to a different route just to get noticed. And even though this is a negative way to end this identity section, the thought is that I'd rather be somebody bad and noticed than nobody at all. Again, this is the third problem, according to Erickson, that can emerge in identity development. We're next going to turn to autonomy. Again, another psychosocial concept, and that's changing quite substantially in adolescence.